Well, it's been a while. This one, or let me say, in that while, uh, when I haven't posted much, I've been doing a lot of browsing, looking at various other channels, and that browsing, it comes together as a collective to inspire this post. To be more precise, I suppose I'll put it in the link in the description. There was a particular short that I watched talking about the sizes of animals actually being bigger than you think. It applies to me because being a modern person, most animals I've seen, besides some dogs I've had, chickens, ducks, and so on, I've seen on TV. And TV has a perspective issue. You see this a lot when you watch, for example, soccer. At least once every match day or weekend, there will be one cross or a shot that a player takes or puts out, which looks like it's going straight into the net, but actually it's very far from going into the net. It's because of the perspective of camera angles and so on. So I think that's what applies to a lot of people, certainly applied to myself. Despite being a lover of facts and details and so on, to really make me underestimate the sizes of animals. Looking at the hyena video in particular, wow, that thing is huge. But what really inspired, or I've had this in mind for quite a while, but what pushed me over the edge to make me want to post, it was the comment section. In the comment section, people were doing their thing. Well, I suppose people, perhaps bots as well, they were doing their thing with comments. And some of them were giving praise of a religious nature, for creation and so on. And that's what triggered me. Because there's a slight misunderstanding there. Now, just to clarify, I myself am a religious person. I don't like to state the precise position because of stereotypes and the assumptions that people make. Assumptions which I suppose are logical to make. Otherwise, how much time would we spend describing the precise details of our positions, our beliefs, our alignments, and so on, if no assumptions were made? No, assumptions are logical to make, and they make conversation easier more often than not. But being assumptions, they're not always correct, and when it comes to religion, there's a lot to talk about there. But even if the assumptions are correct, for me in particular in my posts, I don't like to reveal precise details of my beliefs because I want the focus, I want the exchange to be about precisely what I presented. If we talk about, for example, why in the context of animals, cheetahs faster than lions, Another brother brings in biology, the musculature. Another brother brings in philosophy, principles of survival. Another brother brings in this, that, or even a sister. You're welcome too, sisters. If I then reveal that, let's say, I'm a biologist at this institution, if that institution, as is the case in many institutions in modern times, has some parts of its history which is dark, the conversation is derailed by the focus on that. When my interest in conversation is precisely what I exclaim, what I am interested in. If I'm asking a question, if I'm presenting a point, I want exchange on that. Now, I don't mind, especially when you get to heavy topics, any exchange, as long as it's honest, it's genuine. If the person says, for example, I'm a religious person, they think that my specific religion was probably written by dogs living in a cave or something like that. If it's their genuine opinion, the way that understanding works, and therefore entities which can possess understanding must work, is that we are all logical entities. One cannot have any belief, no matter what it is, without a reason behind it. Now, the reason is not always direct in terms of a person did research or saw this evidence and therefore that's why they believe what they believe. Sometimes it's associative. A person heard someone they trust make this claim or that claim. Trust is a logical element as well. Could be a person has professional benefits for claiming to align with this belief or that belief. Let's say, for example, in politics. Could be many reasons, but there will be a reason. A belief and any sort of understanding cannot stand on its own. Has to be a foundation to it. That foundation is the reasons and the reasons behind the reasons and so on. So for me, as long as what a person says is what they genuinely believe or understand, that is valuable, because then the exchange we will have will be meaningful. It will be practical in value. He will present why he believes what he believes. I will present why I believe differently, if I believe differently. And by comparing our reasons, we learn. From learning, we have a better understanding, and especially in context of things like politics or religion, it could change our lives, the way we live our lives. As long as the exchange is genuine, the opinions expressed are the actual opinions of the parties that are expressing them. I understand the idea of devil's advocate or of a representative in a discussion, but when you really get down to it, you need someone who genuinely believes the position that they are defending, or at least who did at the start of the conversation. That is what will allow you to get to the roots of any belief, of any position relating to understanding of things, of reality. Anyways, I like my exchanges genuine. So then, as we talk about things, especially the more serious things, or the conversations which look at the more serious parts of life, politics, philosophy, religion, science, sociology, the conversations where, as a result of the conversation, a change can happen in how a person lives their life. And in modern times, even in whether the person will still be alive tomorrow or not. Say, for example, politics, you get civil wars, you get things like the shootings which have been happening in America and so on. Although there is a lot to be said about that, just work with the idea of what I'm saying here. Because in those conversations, we are dealing with things which are of importance, of life-changing importance even. Not to say other conversations are not important, but rather to say the details of this have direct impacts on life of these conversations. We get in a certain state of mind, which in my case, for example, I tend to panic a lot and I forget this, I forget that. Under certain circumstances, we don't always catch or get to give every piece of information from our side or to our side, which can make a difference in the conclusion we reach in this conversation. We can miss this detail, that detail, and it can be meaningful, can be of importance. Now, usually, by the nature of important things, they have an impact in life and so on. Most points should be covered if they are important, should be mentioned if they make a difference, because they literally make a difference, they impact our lives, easy to remember them. But still, sometimes we don't always remember this point or that point. We don't always catch this detail, that detail. In reading documents, say for example, new research was done, an unexpected discovery was made, we can be excited for the conclusion, miss the steps in the process towards the conclusion. We can be interested, especially if we have a professional connection, in the process, miss the conclusion. We can miss things. We are not functionally perfect. And I think that what I want to present here is one such thing that has been missed, and it can be of some importance. What is this? Recently I saw a thread on some website. The thread says, who are you related to who was famous or a big deal in history? And various people post their relatives, and of course soon enough that funny business with American presidents all supposedly being related or something, that comes up, and another responder to the thread, apparently he or she is related to one of the presidents, and that means they related to a lot of them, and it was an extensive post they made, being the 8th cousin and the 10th cousin and all of that. And not just 8th, 10th cousins, but twice removed, triple removed, those sort of things. You see, when we talk about that twice removed, triple removed thing in relations with relatives and so on, it applies here to this point I'm making. Because we look at animals, we look at wildlife videos. I love them since I was a kid. It's really weird though, because I'm an active person in terms of, if there's something, it must be dealt with. If it's something good, it must be protected. If there's something bad, problem must be solved. I'm a person who tends towards things with meaning, with practical value. And yet, there's really nothing which passes the time as easily and as serenely as watching wildlife documentaries for me. I'm doing nothing, and the animals I'm learning about, cheetahs and lions and giraffes, probably I will never encounter them in my life. There's really very little room for whatever I learn about them to make a proper difference in my life. But they just go down so well with me. And I suspect with many people as well. Which I find interesting, because the practical value is so limited, and yet is probably the one thing that goes down the easiest with me. Oh well, we look at these documentaries and videos and clips and so on, and we give praise, which I consider very understandable to give. Nature is majestic. It's not just the animals, the plants as well. It's really amazing what's there. We give praise. But what actually applies is that it's that 10th cousin, twice removed, triple removed thing. The environment, the nature, the creation that we see is really, I'm working on a religious foundation here, to be more precise, biblical. It's quite a lot removed from the original creation. There are 5 to 10 major events that happened in Genesis alone, which make the creation that we see quite a bit removed from the original. Not too far, but quite a bit. Firstly, the fall of man, sin entering the world. Sin, with sin, death. So I do wonder, in the Garden of Eden, or in the world as a whole, before sin became a part of the picture, did lions have fangs that look very precisely suited for killing? Now, from experience, I am open-minded in considering possibilities. It could be they had fangs, but it could be that those fangs are also very well suited for eating specific fruits or something that we don't know about because they're in Eden, or they were removed from the world when corruption took over. Who knows? We think of fangs, we think that's precisely suited for delivering death, but that's simply how it's used. Consider speech. The platform that speech gives us for exchanging understanding, and not just language like spoken word speech. Even with animals, the gestures they use to indicate aggression, to indicate friendliness, all of that. That's language too, that is sharing understanding for its own purposes. Contextually suitable purposes. The ability to share understanding. Very much one of the major parts of the foundation of civilization. No, of any group-based existence, or any existence where it's not just you on your own looking at your garden. There are others who make a difference. Of life, of, in environments where there are multiple parties, of living beings' ability to work constructively in that environment. Speech, the ability to share understanding, it's huge. And now that I think about that, the Tower of Babel situation actually now makes even more sense. To give people different languages so that they cannot understand each other. Because language is really a big, big deal. Although I'm a bit scared of the full meaning of that. Because if it's just spoken language, I'm not good at language. I studied different languages at school. I've forgotten most of them. One in particular. I've tried studying other languages, but really after I locked onto English, learning other languages became the most difficult thing for me. I'm really not good at that. But we can learn each other's languages. At least spoken language. So why would simply giving people different languages be enough to stop another Tower of Babel happening? Why would heaven be satisfied with that intervention only? So I think it could also mean our, let me call it spiritual, our foundational language within us. The way we think, the way we act, the way we step. Not just the spoken language, but something that lies deeper in the foundations behind spoken language itself. Nonetheless, we've got spoken language. There's many of them. So it probably was that, but it seems too easy to just learn each other's languages. I wonder if there's more in terms of precisely what it means to give people different languages. Could it mean something that means by our own effort we can never truly understand each other? That is a troublesome thought on the philosophical side. The value of society, the meaning and all of that. Well, anyways, language, it's a big deal. when I consider these things, I'm conservative of making the standard assumption. Basically, if a lion has fangs, that means you have to ask, did it have fangs in Eden or not? If it did, then death was engineered from the start. You have to start pointing fingers at the creator and so on. No, I wouldn't be so quick. Life is massive. There's a lot of details in it. Just as you see with speech, politicians and the like, they use them to lie to. Honestly, it's not just politicians. It's people at ground level lying to each other with almost every step. It's a horrible situation. The fact that 99% of people use language 99% of the time to be dishonest, either to outright lie or to deceive subtly and so on. Psychological warfare is a real thing. Does that mean that the existence of speech itself means that the creator wanted people to be liars? No. We can say no because we've got direct presentation of language as a foundation for honest talk, sharing, and so on. But what if, just as a what if, we just so happened to be misinformed or straight up stupid enough to not know that actually language can be used for honesty. It doesn't have to be a weapon like that. How many of us would be on our nihilistic runs talking about how existence itself agrees with dishonesty and lying? Well, no, it's just corruption happens, and a tool which, honestly, in my view, it's so beautiful, can be used in the wrong way. Look at metal. Can use metal to build a water tank, build a shield. Can also use it to make swords and knives and stab and kill people. The way people use something, or the way any entity uses something besides, the actual creator, doesn't honestly mean much in terms of how it was meant to be used. So it is possible, I consider now, for lions and the like to have had fangs in Eden. Not just lions and there's a reason to believe they may not have had them, but even snakes and their poisons. We call them poisons because the way they affect us now. But are our bodies the same as the way they were in Eden? If the thing we call poison now, we recognize as harmful when it goes into our bloodstream, went into Adam's flesh before death entered the world, what effect would it have had? Maybe, the exact same things could have been there, but their usage completely different. There is more to the details of reality, of creation, than we know, so one should be careful of jumping to conclusions, no matter how obvious they look. You could very easily say, it is a question of, in Eden, did lions have fangs or not? And that tells you about that. Nope. Same fang. Could have had a completely different function, which is completely constructive, not delivering death. Life, we haven't seen all of life, and based on what I know or have heard, from my other research, we haven't even seen more than 10% of what it consists of. Many possibilities. But just to close off on the fang point, it is stated, this I would call the second removing, that after the fall of man, thorns and thistles became a thing in nature. Thorns are sharp and so on, a lot like fangs. So I wonder, could fangs have grown and so on after Eden, and before Eden were not there? But anyways, to continue. Firstly, we had Eden, no death. What no death means. Firstly, philosophically. The snake is presented as being corrupt by itself. There is also the narrative that it was the devil. Problem is, the snake was punished excessively. The snake was punished specifically, a punishment other animals didn't receive. So there has to be something with the snake. Even a prophecy was given, the crushing of the heel and the head and so on. That seems like a sensible punishment if the specific target of it is the guilty party. Perhaps Taco Talks and them might have something to say on this. Well, the snake being a corrupt party or having wishes and a personality alignment to do something bad, says the entrance of death, the entrance of corruption, is more of the physical changes that occurred. Previously, Adam and Eve were supposed to be immortal, if I've understood correctly. Although the part that says if they eat the other fruit, then they'll be immortal. But still, if death is not there, seems like they were in a state of immortality already. But we read, firstly there's the punishments. The pain of childbirth, the losing your legs for the snake, the crushing of the head with the heel and so on. Those are physical changes that, well, except for the crushing of the head, that's a process. Those are physical changes being made to life, to those who live it, to reality. The appearance of the thorns and thistles. Those are physical changes to the environment. So the entrance of sin and of death had, at minimum, a proper physical impact on the physical environment that we live in. That's the first removing, I would say. Therefore, when we look at nature, and it's beautiful and amazing and all of that, it's probably not the precise nature that was there before the entrance of sin. Hence, I say the first removing from the original creation. Then, secondly, change does occur. The strength of the evolution theory and so on is that it takes very practical parts of the environment and it builds from them. You go to the gym, you grow muscle. Evolution says an animal grows more with the parts of its body that it uses, and the parts that it doesn't use, they diminish. It's literally just going to the gym, but being taken and applied over, a much bigger picture. Two different people can come from two different cities and drive or walk to the same city. That's what they call convergent evolution. And going from the same city to different places, divergent evolution. These are all principles that are there in practical life. That's the strength of the evolution theory. So, after the entrance of something massive like death, which had already had the first physical change, firstly, we are not told that it was the Creator who brought thorns and thistles to punish us. No, we are simply told they began to grow. So first, it seems like there was an automatic change with the entrance of death, of sin, of disobedience, of corruption into creation, the created world. An automatic change that occurred by itself. It seems like it. Second, there are other verses which would allow for the conclusion that it was the Creator who did it directly. But I prefer to reference those verses in other conversations. I'd rather not have them distract from this point that I'm making here. I want the conversation to be about that. But if firstly the thorns and thistles happened by themselves, then that's the first removing. Well, no, that's the second removing. The first removing, the entrance of death. Death is such a big thing. If a person getting mistreated by their boss at work can traumatize them and really mess them up for the rest of their lives, I have experience with that, unfortunately. It hits you hard, trauma. It hits you, you recognize it. You can read it like a book on paper, but you can't just undo it by choice. You can't just do mathematics for it and there's your answer, trauma gone. No, it hits you in a way. Very troublesome business. In fact, it seems to be even referenced. There is another verse. Spare the rod, spoil the child. The rod being an effective thing. Another verse, same Proverbs. The rod is for the back of fools. Trauma it has an effect on the very person, the personality within. If it works like those verses say. Of course, there's a practical difference between disciplining a child and traumatizing a child, but that's contextual. It's in the context where we are talking about what is the best way to raise your child. We are understanding it based on how we use it. It's basically slang. But the pure usage, the pure objective fact is that discipline uses trauma. The question is how much trauma is too much. If you just smack a child in the hand for doing something naughty, is that too much? When you then take out this belt and you go heavy on them, Is that just discipline, or has it now become too much? What we properly call trauma. Traumatizing someone and so on. That's the question. But the objective factor at play is indeed trauma. Something that you don't want to experience again. I'm speaking objectively here. So, there should have been, if, there are those who say what some would consider a little discipline, corporal punishment. They say to them it utterly ruined them. It had an effect on their mind. The way they live their life changed. They can't laugh with people anymore. There are such cases. Or at least there are many claims to such cases which I consider credible. If what I think most would consider a little discipline, a smack on the hand or something, can be so traumatizing to a person throughout their life, possibly, even if not most people, then can you imagine what the entrance of death as a concept would have done to the soul, to the spirits of all the living entities who are there? Man, animals, even the environment, plants and so on. What would it have done to them at a spiritual level, where the personality and so on resides, or is closer connected to? So I consider the very entrance of death to be the first removing. I consider animals fully alive. This idea that, as I said, I'm a religious person, not exactly an evolutionist and so on, that we are smarter, animals are stupid, I honestly consider it nonsense. I mean, I disagree with evolution theory, the millions of years things and so on, but as I said, I can appreciate that it works with concepts that are real. Go to the gym, your muscles grow bigger. Functional evolution. The way travel works, divergent, convergent evolution. I forgot the third principle it uses. But I've also considered it before. It's just a practical part of life. But what was I saying? The impact of the entrance of death would have made a big difference, and you've got stories from folklore around the world, practically everywhere. You've got stories from religion directly. Interactions with animals are never treated as interactions with a subhuman thing. It's treated as interactions with another person whose physical body happens to belong to a different group than yours. The donkey in with Balak and Balaam, that guy had spiritual powers, for goodness sake. His donkey is outsmarting him. The snake in Eden, many other interactions with animals in religion, in folklore, they are not treated as lacking intelligence, understanding, a proper brain. They're just treated as different creatures of a different order, which was given a different position in life, but not that its ability to recognize life is lesser. So, if we experience trauma, why wouldn't animals experience trauma? In fact, the theory of evolution ultimately becomes a massive proponent of trauma being something that any living creature can experience, because animals adapting, most of the time they're adapting to getting beaten up by bigger, stronger animals and so on, going around fighting new territory, all of that. That's a trauma system. Objective trauma, not the trauma that really harms people. So I conclude that the entrance of death, of sin, would have, at least due to the factor that is trauma, would have made a massive change to living creatures everywhere. People, animals, everywhere. At least on Earth. Would have made a big difference. I would hold back and say I wouldn't say with certainty difference is a physical one, more of a psychological, sort of like when you can feel something in your bones, this is not good, this is good, and so on. That's sort of a difference. Kunjani? Ngiyaphila Nkosi. A neighbor passing through. But still, psychological trauma, what I would call spiritual trauma, can have an impact through the generations. I mean, that's how they explain your instincts and so on, right? So it would have made a difference that changes nature from how it originally was. Then you've got the thorns and the thistles, which is a proper physical difference. I will call that the second removing, perhaps. Or let's call the thorns and... First is the entrance of death as a concept. That has a psychological impact, massive trauma that probably lasts through all generations. Then the thorns and the thistles, physical difference directly to nature now. That's the second removing. Then the third one, the punishments given directly by the Creator as recorded. The pain of childbirth, at least. That's a change to the life experience. Another addition of something traumatic. I would call that the third removing. The snake losing its legs, part of the third removing. Then there's a fourth removing. The fourth removing is similar to the entrance of sin. It's another corruption that takes place, a disobedience to the instructions of the Holy One. This one is the fallen angels. And as with basically one action from Adam and Eve causing three removings, this one would have had a number as well. Firstly, the angels coming down and doing their dirty business. They would have done experiments on Earth. I mean, we've supposedly created clones of sheep. They would have done crazy things. I mean, you're talking angels, heavenly beings. They would have done crazy things. Others have noted centaurs and minotaurs and those sort of creatures as probably the result of the work of the fallen angels. I'm in agreement with that. I don't have something conclusive to give to it, but it seems a very logical conclusion. I'm in agreement with that. So, their direct work when they were here That's at least a fourth removing from original nature. Question: how much did they change with their experiments? There's that creature you call a chimera, however I pronounce it. A lion with eagle's wings, a snake tail, and I think even more body changes and so on. Now, being angels, they should have had a certain respect for creation, which perhaps they would have built a lab. Perhaps that's those South American desert drawings, something like that, where they take their creatures which they've modified and they remove them from nature. But they were doing corrupt things. Maybe they wouldn't. Maybe all of nature was corrupted physically through their experiments and whatever they were doing. To counter this, there is the very purpose of the flood. Take the clean animals, I think 72 or whatever, the clean animals, the unclean animals. Wait, when did the other animals become unclean? Maybe it was the work of the fallen angels. Because unclean and clean is not mentioned in Eden, in that saga. When did clean and unclean become a thing? Maybe it was the fallen angels. At minimum, Noah was told about it, instructed on it, so it was a thing by that time. I figure either it was the fallen angels, because I wonder, would the creator have created certain animals from the beginning with some distinction in class between clean and unclean? Well, there wouldn't have been unclean before sin comes into the world. Perhaps it's similar to the lion's fangs thing. It was another different distinction in class that had its own purpose, which wasn't a problem. But once sin came in, corrupted practically everything, now it becomes a distinction of clean and unclean. Could have come from then, Eden, original creation. Could have come from the mini evolution that happened in the few hundred or few thousand years between Adam, the fall of man, and the flood. Could have been the work of the fallen angels, or something else that I haven't thought of. Well, firstly, with their, let's call it experiments, although with their knowledge, I don't think it was experiments, but rather more of playing around with what they look at as very simple toys. If those chimeras and so on were removed by the flood, one could argue, therefore, that fourth removing doesn't count. Problem is, the giants were not. I think the giants were removed during the flood, by the flood process. However, we are directly told that they existed after, and I very much believe that. There's that story about the giant of Kandahar in Iraq and so on. I think there's many of those. Somehow the giants remained. We are told, as for how that could have been, I too wonder. There are those who say there was a second coming down, which logically seems simple. If angels can't disobey in the first place, why would we assume that they only disobeyed that one time in history? Well, they should be better than us in terms of discipline, and the punishment was heavy. Based on the Book of Enoch, heavy punishment. So, maybe even probably, never again was such a disobedience done. But an idea I'm more comfortable with is this. Well, there are those who present could have been one of the wives of the sons of Noah, was a descendant of Cain or something, but she had already in her blood DNA that was corrupted by the fallen angels thing. The problem is, we are told fallen angels, when they came in and mixed with people, giants. Now we also have the pygmy peoples. It would be very weirdly funny if actually we are the giants and they are the original sort of proper descendants of Adam and Noah. Would be an unexpected thing, but shouldn't that be considered a possibility? That actually they are the normal ones and we are the giants? I say we, I'm barely 5 foot myself. And history that's presented say I probably do have pygmy blood in me from my ancestors. Well, anyways. There's the idea that one of the wives of the sons of Noah had blood that wasn't quite. I'm against it because shouldn't then she have been a giant? Surely none of those three would have married giants. I mean, they weren't, perfect people. We know just from the grandson Canaan that there were already problems. The thing is, though, an idea that I have is, we are told Noah was a good man. He is properly presented as one in what was probably a population of 100 billion at the time. Literally one guy in the world. That's the picture that I get when I read those verses. One guy. That means his children were not considered like that. Probably. Maybe they were good, maybe not. So I think there's a clean possibility of his children not being properly disciplined, being spared as an homage to Noah. Because he's good, his children are getting spared. Read the sections where it gives us the name of the Holy One. Not that they were also good, and therefore they were spared based on their own goodness. So, it's possible that they straight up chose a woman whose blood was not pure, let's say. But I've got an issue with the idea of the blood of one of the women not being pure, because wouldn't she have been a giant? Then again, who's to say that the gene of the giants has to activate immediately? It seems to be caused by the spiritual nature, the spiritual intensity of children born from angels and so on. So probably would have been activated immediately in the next generation. But I can't say with certainty it has, if there was fallen angel blood ancestry, it has to have activated immediately. I incline towards it activating immediately, but I really don't have something more to say by necessity has to have activated immediately. Could be one of the women was one of, two of, all three, who knows. had fallen angel ancestry. If not ancestry, could also just have been a victim of an experiment. I mean, those guys would have been experts on levels you cannot imagine. I mean, look at what our scientists are supposed to be doing, with fruits, seedless fruits, and all of that stuff. If that's the work of our scientists, imagine angels, the level of understanding, knowledge they would have had. Insane. But I lean closer to saying, look at the sons themselves. Not just the woman, the sons. There is obviously that tendency to look at the woman as being the problem. No, the men are not much good either. Could be one of them. Remember, they would have been something like 100 or more years old when the flood happened. Could have been one of them, kept the knowledge of the fallen angels, kept, let's say, some test tube with the thing that changes the DNA of animals, creating chimeras. Maybe in some drunken fit one day consumed it, and that's why giants came back in human DNA and so on. Basically, I don't think you need a second falling of angels in order for giants to come back. Could have been from the people. I mean, I don't think you need one of the women to be the problem either. Could have been from the sons. But at the same time, it's difficult to logically exclude the idea of, if it wasn't a second falling of angels, it has to have been one of the people or something like that. Could be many things in my view. For one, if angels could disobey once, what stops any angel, like literally right now, from disobeying? I would say their character, their discipline and all of that, but it's not properly fixed in place, as in it's impossible for angels to be continuously falling throughout human history. I think it's possible. I can't point fingers good and proper, but just as, like, on the logical side of things, I think it's possible. Well, anyways, fallen angels, firstly, their own mixing in with people, utter forth removing, because they will then give birth to giants. What stops the giants from then doing things in nature to again corrupt nature? Just from the giants themselves. Then we know there were experiments. Practically we know. From chimeras and those ideas, minotaurs and all of them. There were things that were done to nature. Experiments, playing around, whatever you want to call it. Things were done. So with the fallen angels, you've got two removings. Fourth one, firstly from them giving birth to giants who would have been corrupt beings and all of that. Fifth one, from wherever the chimera come from. Minotaurs and all of those creatures. And honestly, there's even a sixth one in there. Sixth one would be, in Garden of Eden, snake pushed, corruption into the picture. With flood, fallen angels pushed more corruption into the picture. And we read from other books that there are other creatures that the Holy One created besides the basic animals and people that we see. I'm talking about creatures where people say they think they've seen its head on a map. A picture I saw, I'm not properly convinced, but it could be. Because with the technology we're supposed to have and so on, I mean, I don't believe every claim they say about, oh, look at our amazing technology. But it is very capable on a destructive side. It's difficult to imagine anything that's just made of normal flesh properly being above the capabilities of even modern humanity. Never mind the ancient guys who built the pyramids and whatever magics they used. Even modern people with bombs and all of that. Difficult to imagine any basic animal getting in a sort of 1v, humanity fight and winning. But in the other book, the Leviathan and Behemoth seem to be presented as creatures that are outright above all of humanity's capability to contend with. Not just a single man, but all of humanity. Especially because those creatures are described as being associated with the end times. End times, technology, magic, all the systems that humanity has used before, basically at their peak, surely. So these must be some impressive creatures. So why can't they then, as also being part of the Creator's work, there be even more creatures? I'm thinking of things like the phoenix and so on. Why can't there be creatures like that that are genuinely part of reality, part of creation? And they've been assigned whatever role or place they've been assigned, but just like the angels, just like the snake in Eden, they should also have free will and the capability to disobey. And I would think excessive knowledge compared to what people have, and could do something like genetic manipulations on the earth. Do something or give people knowledge of how to do those things. I would consider that a possible sixth removing from original creation. Then the flood happens. It talks about clean and unclean creatures. But over hundreds of generations of animals, in fact, they say lions live 10 to 15 years. Male lions apparently just over 5 years. If people have like 100 generations from King David, 130 I think, should be 135 to 140 by now, then to Noah should be what, 200, 250, 300? Just from Noah, people can have, let's say, 300 generations from him, and there's so much diversity in people. I mean, we've got straight up pygmies. Like I said, could it be that we are the giants? I don't think so, by the way, but just the question is there. For creatures, animals, some of which only live like 5 to 10 years, how many generations is that? They say mayflies, those insects, live for 6 days. My goodness. It should be around 4,000 to 5,000 years since Noah. How many 6-day process, like times have we gone through? So for mayflies, they should be in their 100,000th generation. What are the chances that they're still the same as not Eden, but just from Noah's time, just from Noah? Also, don't ask me about insects during the flood. Don't ask me. Insects, bacteria, all those things. But even just lions living 5 to 10 years, that is a lot of generations. 1,000 generations since Noah. Maybe more, maybe slightly less, but a lot more than people. What are the chances that they're not exactly as they were at the time of Noah? That long time period, especially with most animals having far shorter lives than people, I would consider that a collective 6th or 7th removing from original creation. And of course, with animals, in my view, also having their own full intelligence, who's to say they didn't do things as a community that would have caused yet another removing on top of what I've already mentioned, the thousands of years and so on. And honestly, when I read about the Romans putting animals in the Colosseum and so on, what are the chances that throughout history, the various empires and humanity in general have been trying to tamper with creation, nature? Also, you've got such things as disformities or deformities. Couldn't it be that there are some poisons in nature which don't simply kill you immediately or cause you some pain, but they do something to your DNA itself? I would say that's an 8th removing, a possibility of an 8th removing, even a probability. There's so much to nature. We don't know all the plants, we don't know all the animals, there's a lot we don't know. So yeah, okay, let me say what this 8th removing from original creation. Could there be more? Let me think. I don't think there were too many environmental changes. Honestly, even now, I don't think there's too much environmental change. Then again, most who align with me are not big proponents of climate change, but the idea that we do things and they make a difference to the environment, especially with how closed it is, if you know what I mean, that makes a lot of sense to me logically. And historically, whether it was magic or something else, whatever it is that the Egyptians used to build the pyramids, I heard the idea they may not necessarily have been built. I disagree. There's a flaw in that idea. To build the pyramids, the Romans would have used to build their bridges. They've got 800-ton stones, rocks, boulders in their bridge works. Like, we had capabilities back in the past that we do not have them today with technology. Technology that we've got today cannot build pyramids. It cannot. So whatever it is they used, whether it was magic, whether it was another falling of angels doing things, whether it was the other creatures, let's say things like phoenixes existed and so on, were created as well. I mean, if there's Leviathan and Behemoth, why can't there be phoenixes? Um, something that has a lot of power to do things in the environment was present throughout human history, long after Noah. Too many ancient construction works, not just the big things, the pyramids and the Roman bridges and so on. Even things like Damascus steel, a form of steel that they made back in the days of, I think, Persia and so on. Apparently, we don't know how to make it today. Maybe the so-called AI could figure it out, but its material composition, apparently we don't know how to take metals from the ground and turn them into that precise state of Damascus steel. In fact, even to that question, how was it made? There are some assumptions which may not be true. There is a lot to reality. We assume too much. We don't know nearly enough. Those other creatures, whatever this other force was, or multiple forces present with each major civilization, they could do things that, as far as I know, we cannot right now. So what are the chances they did genetic things to the environment as well? Animals, plants, even rocks, the works. What are the chances? Oh, yes. So that would be a possible 9th removing. And then for a 10th removing, I forgot. Again, we go back to Enoch. The book gives an explanation for what we call demons. The spirits of the dead. The explanation basically says they are there, they are around, they are active. That's what the explanation says, the conclusion of it. To go into the details, it's worth another conversation by itself. If that is true, that is the case, what are the chances that they would have, what do you call it when they take over a person's body? I forgot what, possession. They would have possessed someone and then lived life through that person and used their knowledge as the children of fallen angels to continuously interfere with nature throughout history. What are the chances that they would have figured out a way to yet again mix in with people after the flood? Because their spirits are still alive. Surely could possess people or do something of the sort. But, I mean, look at how many depressed or nihilistic kids nowadays are joining satanic cults. What are the chances that throughout history, those who are working to basically give bodies to demons and so on, and these bodies influenced by the spirit of the demon, what we call the demon, has some changes to its genetic identity, and when that person gets married, has children, those children now become giants because it's a spiritual difference. That could actually be another way for how it is that there are giants after the flood, because the spirits of the children of the fallen angels are still here. And since the cause of the original change between normal person and giant is the spiritual difference between an angel and a spirit, an undead spirit, same thing, spiritual difference. That could, I think, actually it's even a probability now, could be the source of giants after the flood. I think easily could be the source of it. So, just with them, I mean, with people alone, being people throughout the 100, 300 generations since Noah. 300 is not an official number, it's my estimation. Between 250 and 300 generations since Noah. More informed people, please come through and correct me. Or confirm if my guess is on the mark. It's a guess. An estimation. If people throughout the generations could have done things to make creation very different, even from the time of Noah, then couldn't the spirits of the children of the fallen angels, if they could interact with people, which I very much think they could, couldn't they do things? I mean, surely they could. And considering their personalities, surely they would. So I would say that is another separate removing by itself. And that's where I'm at for now. So basically, there you go. 10 different causes of changes to nature, animals, plants, and so on, and the environment. Each of them making it different from what it would have been in the Garden of Eden before sin came into the world. Sin coming into the world, the spiritual trauma that causes, will be the first removing. Then the change that happened with the entrance of thorns and thistles, that's a second removing. Then the specific punishments that the Creator gives out, changing the body of the snake, like straight up, that's a third removing. Then the falling of the fallen angels, and specifically them mixing in with people, either their children would have definitely continued doing corruptions to nature. That would be a fourth removing. And besides their children, the fallen angels themselves, with their knowledge, with chimeras and centaurs and all of them, and minotaurs, they would have done things to nature and to the environment that would have caused changes yet again. Then whatever it is that caused animals to be separated into two classes, those that are clean and those that are unclean, whether it was caused by animals themselves, whether it's one of the corruptions that come with sin entering the world, whether similar to the lion's fang thing, whereby it originally had a clean purpose, now it's being the corruption, now it's being used to kill. Whatchamacallit. Whatever caused the separation from clean and unclean probably was a big enough event to be a fifth removing. Sixth removing, the work of the fallen angels directly, chimeras and so on. Seventh removing, people throughout history would have done things. I mean, nowadays we cause changes to the environment. The idea of people being capable of causing changes to the environment, in terms of pure process, seems logical to me. Problem is, there are verses that say there's a clear limit to how much change people can cause, and that limit seems very small. Read around the flood. But anyways, throughout the ages, throughout history, people's work could have caused an overall effective seventh removing. Then you've got the spirits of the dead, the children of the fallen angels, what we now call demons, and so on. They would probably actually be the source of giants after the flood, because they would have then possessed people like Canaan and Canaanites and so on. And since it was a spiritual difference that caused giantification in the first place, that's a spiritual difference to the person. If they then breed, that would probably cause a difference to the child, in the child. So them and their work throughout the generations. Eighth, removing. Ninth, removing would be what would it be again? Yes, whatever force, powers, magic, whatever it was that allowed for constructions like the pyramids, the Roman bridges, various ancient architecture around the whole world. Whatever it was that allowed that, it's clearly a massive power, and I think could easily cause corruptions to the environment that amounts to a ninth removing. And even apparently they've done some scans of Antarctica, and there's supposed to be buildings there, animals frozen as if they were frozen instantly and all of that. Not a slow process. Something was going on in Antarctica. I happen to know that modern governments aren't being very honest about it. It is a protected territory, by the way, United Nations. If you just want to go there, you are straight up not allowed. The army will stop you. I mean, people are allowed to be stupid, right? Okay, let's say you're going to die of the cold. It's your choice. Why should they care to stop you? There's clearly something going on there. I would call that part of the ninth removing. 10th removing. Oh yes, the generations, the pure number of generations in animals. If for people it's 300 generations since Noah, then for animals, for even just for lions, it's 1,000 generations. For things like insects, 10,000, 100,000 generations even. Time, basically. 10th removing. There. A total of 10 different causes for the nature we see, both animals and plants and all of that, to be very different from the way that it was in the Garden of Eden. And I've had some of these in mind for some time, but I've really just put this list together right now on the fly as I'm talking. It wasn't prepped beforehand, nothing written down, none of that. Just, it came to mind that, hey, let me put out this idea while going through the comment section of that other video about the sizes of animals. So I would think people who are more studied on the subjects, people you could call proper specialists. I'm simply interested in truth, and that leads me to this research and that research. It's a natural process day by day. But for proper researchers of the subject, they could probably put together some other things that would have, over the generations, caused wholesale changes to nature, to animals, to plants, and so on. I could probably put together a proper list, maybe 15, 20 things that would have caused these removings. Which means that really, similar to how if you take a 10th cousin and invite him to family dinner, you've invited a friend more than you've invited a family member, in practical terms. So likewise, when we look at nature and think this is creation, I think it's a friend of creation. Very far removed from what the original would have looked like. But in the context of giving praise, think of it like this. If right now, in a world where there is death so much, I mean, you've got an entire class of animals called predators. They literally straight up live off of death. I'm sorry, that's how it is. I do believe, though, that they can eat plants, but they eat other animals. If with so much death, animals and plants and flowers, honestly, they still look so beautiful. I mean, they're mad beautiful. If they still look so beautiful, can you imagine how beautiful it was in Eden, in a world before sin became a part of the picture? This is why I say the devil is a hater of immense proportions. He advertised tasty things similar to fast food adverts. But what we already had on the dinner plate, the most beautiful things, the world that we had already, the life that we had already in Eden, the most beautiful, beautiful things, life. But in his hatefulness, tries to influence things so that we lose all of that. But even so, after all his work, over thousands of years, we still have so much beauty in life, in nature. So the Creator really is praiseworthy, extensively so. Let this thought of precisely how much we've lost, just in the nature that we've got to look at, be a alarm bell, a thing that says, stick with the life that the Creator gives us. That is what's best for everyone. No matter what advertisements the devil makes for you could have it better if you disobey. Surely we've lost enough.